Dan wiped the sweat from his brow. The relentless summer sun was unforgiving, casting a golden hue over the sprawling fields. Each bead of sweat that trickled down his face was a testament to the hard work and dedication he poured into his land. The farm was not just a place of work, it was a living, breathing entity that demanded respect and care. The afternoon sun beat down on his back as he worked on his Farmall tractor. This tractor, with its chipped paint and worn-out parts, had seen better days. Yet, to Dan, it was irreplaceable. It was a relic of the past, a piece of history that connected him to his roots. Every bolt he tightened, every part he replaced was done with a sense of reverence. It was a rusty beast of a machine, passed down from his grandfather. The stories of its past echoed in Dan's mind as he worked. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice recounting tales of harvests long gone and the challenges they overcame together. This tractor was more than just a tool, it was a bridge to the past, a reminder of the resilience and determination that ran in his family. The tractor was more than just metal and gears to Dan, it was a symbol of his family's legacy, their connection to the land. Each groove and dent told a story, each scratch a memory. As he gripped the steering wheel, he felt a surge of pride. This was his heritage, his responsibility to uphold. He gripped the wrench tighter, the cool metal a stark contrast to the summer heat. The weight of the wrench in his hand was reassuring, a tool that had been used by generations before him. It was a connection to the past, a tangible link to the men who had worked this land before him. The sun blazed overhead, but Dan was undeterred. He had a job to do, and he would see it through. A flash of color caught his eye. Amidst the browns and greens of the farm, it was a vibrant splash that stood out. It was unusual, almost out of place. Yet it brought a sense of curiosity and intrigue. A striped umbrella bobbed down the dusty road. Its bright colors were a stark contrast to the muted tones of the countryside. The umbrella moved with a rhythm, almost as if it had a life of its own, swaying gently with each step. It was Charlie, his closest friend and confidant. Charlie's presence was always a welcome sight. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. The umbrella was his signature, a quirky addition to his otherwise simple attire. It was a symbol of his unique personality, a blend of practicality and whimsy. The umbrella was Charlie's trademark, a splash of whimsy in their otherwise ordinary world. It was a reminder that even in the most mundane of settings, there was room for a bit of color and joy. Charlie's arrival always brought a sense of lightness, a break from the routine. Dan leaned against the tractor, a smile tugging at his lips. The sight of Charlie and his umbrella never failed to amuse him. It was a small yet significant reminder of the simple pleasures in life. The two friends shared a bond that went beyond words, a connection forged through years of shared experiences and mutual respect. He knew Charlie was coming to see him, their conversations under the old oak tree a sacred ritual. The oak tree, with its sprawling branches and deep roots, was a silent witness to their friendship. It provided shade and comfort, a place where they could talk freely and share their thoughts. "Afternoon, Dan," Charlie greeted, his voice a low rumble. There was a warmth in his tone, a familiarity that spoke of years of camaraderie. Charlie's voice was like the rumble of distant thunder, steady and reassuring. He planted the umbrella in the soft earth, casting a patch of shade. The umbrella, with its vibrant stripes, created a small oasis in the midst of the sun-drenched field. It was a simple act, yet it brought a sense of relief and comfort. "Right on time," Dan replied, wiping his greasy hands on his overalls. There was a sense of routine in their interactions, a rhythm that was both comforting and familiar. Dan's hands were calloused and worn, a testament to the hard work he put into his farm. "What brings you by today?" Dan asked, his curiosity piqued. Their conversations were always a mix of the mundane and the profound, a blend of everyday life and deeper reflections. They settled under the oak tree, the air thick with the smell of cut hay and the promise of an approaching storm. The atmosphere was charged, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. The oak tree provided a sense of stability, a constant in the ever-changing landscape. The umbrella swayed gently in the breeze, its stripes a hypnotic dance against the darkening sky. The storm clouds gathered, casting a shadow over the fields. Yet, amidst the impending storm, the umbrella stood as a beacon of color and hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always a splash of brightness to be found. Dan and Charlie talked about everything and nothing, life, death, the mysteries that lay beyond. They would sit for hours, the shade of the oak tree providing a cool respite from the summer sun. The conversations meandered like the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves above them. It was Charlie who first spoke of the afterlife. His voice hushed as if sharing a secret. He leaned in closer, his eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and conviction. He believed in something more, something beyond the grave. "You know, Dan," he said, "I've always felt there's more to our existence than just this life. We don't just end, Dan," Charlie would say, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the horizon. "Our journey doesn't conclude with our last breath. There's a continuation, a transformation. Our energy, our essence, it goes somewhere. It's like the wind, invisible yet ever-present, moving through the world in ways we can't always see." Dan listened, skeptical yet intrigued. He'd always been a man of science, grounded in the tangible and the measurable. But Charlie's words had a way of slipping past his defenses, planting seeds of doubt and wonder. He'd never been a religious man, but Charlie's words held a strange power. They seemed to echo in the quiet spaces of his mind, challenging his long-held beliefs. They resonated deep within him, stirring something primal and unknown. It was as if Charlie had tapped into a hidden well of thoughts and feelings that Dan had never fully explored. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to life and death than met the eye. The idea of an afterlife, of a continuation beyond the physical, began to take root in his mind. "What do you think happens?" Dan asked one day, his voice barely a whisper. The question had been gnawing at him, and he finally gave in to the urge to seek Charlie's insight. Charlie smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I think it's more than we can imagine," he said, his voice filled with a quiet certainty. "It's like a dream, maybe, a place where the boundaries of reality blur and anything is possible. I think it's more than we can imagine, like a dream maybe, a realm where our deepest desires and fears come to life, where we can explore the infinite possibilities of existence, or a story that never ends. A narrative that continues to unfold, chapter after chapter, each one more wondrous and mysterious than the last. It's a journey, Dan, one that we are all a part of, whether we realize it or not." Dan nodded slowly, absorbing Charlie's words. The oak tree above them seemed to whisper its own secrets, its ancient branches swaying gently in the breeze. In that moment, under the vast expanse of the sky, Dan felt a connection to something greater, something eternal. Their conversations continued, each one peeling back another layer of the mysteries of life. They spoke of dreams, of love, of the unspoken bonds that tie us all together. And through it all, the oak tree stood as a silent witness, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the heavens. In the end, it wasn't about finding definitive answers. It was about the journey, the exploration, the shared moments of wonder and discovery. Under the oak tree, Dan and Charlie found a space where they could ponder the infinite, where they could dream and imagine without limits. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, they knew that their conversations would continue as endless and boundless as the sky above. Death held no fear for Dan, not anymore. Charlie's words had planted a seed in his mind, a seed that blossomed into a strange certainty. He knew, deep down, that he wouldn't truly end. His physical body might wither and decay, but something else, something more profound, would live on. He wasn't sure what form that existence might take. Would it be a blissful oblivion, a reincarnation into a new life, or something entirely different, beyond human comprehension? The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. "I ain't afraid of dying, Charlie," Dan confessed one afternoon, his gaze fixed on the clouds gathering overhead. Charlie nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "I know you're not, Dan. You carry the light within you." Their conversations often drifted to the past. Charlie would reminisce about his childhood summers, picking blueberries in the fields with his grandmother. He talked about the sweet taste of the berries, the warmth of the sun on his skin, and the sound of his grandfather's voice echoing through the trees. "Frank, my grandfather, he used to sing while he worked," Charlie shared, his voice filled with a wistful longing. Said it kept his spirits up. Dan could almost hear the melody, carried on the wind that rustled the leaves overhead. It was a haunting tune, both melancholy and strangely comforting. "What kind of songs?" Dan asked, drawn into Charlie's memories. "Oh, all sorts," Charlie replied, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "Folk songs, hymns, even made up a few of his own." Later that evening, after Charlie had left, Dan retreated to his room. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every creak and rustle. He could still hear the echoes of their conversation, the words lingering in the air like ghosts. A strange uneasiness settled over him. It was as if the shadows themselves were whispering secrets, secrets that he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. He felt a chill run down his spine, a coldness that seemed to seep into his very bones. The conversation about the afterlife, the stories of Charlie's grandparents, it all felt different tonight. Heavier somehow. The tales of spirits and the afterlife, which once seemed like harmless folklore, now felt like ominous warnings. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, something unseen but very much present. He lit a kerosene lamp, the flickering flame casting long shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. The light danced and flickered, creating eerie shapes that seemed to move on their own. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, trapping him with his growing dread. As he turned towards his bed, his gaze fell upon the blackboard hanging on his wall. It was a simple thing, a place for mundane reminders and grocery lists, but tonight it seemed to hold a sinister presence. It was usually blank, used for jotting down grocery lists or reminders. He had never given it much thought. It was just a part of the room's background, a tool for everyday life. But tonight, there was something different scrawled across its surface in stark white chalk. A single word: red rum. Dan's blood ran cold. The word seemed to pulse with a life of its own, each letter a chilling reminder of something dark and malevolent. He stared at the word, his mind struggling to make sense of it. It was as if his brain refused to process the message, a defense mechanism against the terror it implied. He felt a growing sense of panic, his heart pounding in his chest. It was backwards, he realized with a jolt. Murder. The realization hit him like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of him. The words, so simple yet so horrifying, seemed to mock him from the blackboard. But who would write such a thing, and why? His mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Was it a prank, a warning, or something far more sinister? He felt a growing sense of paranoia, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting to see the culprit hiding in the shadows. And why? The question echoed in his mind, a haunting refrain that refused to be silenced. He knew he had to find answers, but the path ahead seemed fraught with danger and uncertainty. To be continued, to be continued.